All the members of the town council are present except Mr. Morris, who's been excused. Also present is our town manager, Cliff Gravier, assistant town manager, John Apple, and town clerk, Lisa Kale. And our attorney, esteemed attorney, Mr. Ligori.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would a council member make a motion regarding the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on January 17th. Tyler,
So moved.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes of the regular meeting on the 17th of January, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Approval of minutes of the workshop special meeting held on January 14th. I'd like to have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions, comments? All in favor of approving the minutes from the workshop special meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Approval of minutes of the executive session held on January 14th. Would like to have a motion?
So moved.
So motion and a second.
Second.
Any changes, comments, edits? All in favor of approving the minutes of the executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Mr. Healy, approval of the financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm subbing here I'm going to read Jerry Morris's report for the period ended January 31, 2020. In total, we've collected 104.9% of the budgeted revenues for the year compared to 99.4%.
Bring the microphone down.
Oh.
Too far.
Compared to 99.4% of this time last year. Operating expenditures, we've expended 83% of our budget compared to 80% expended this time last year. Recognizing this report is subject to audit, I respectfully move council accept and approve this unaudited report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions for Mr. Healy? All in favor of approving the financial report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. At this point, I'm going to, this is the announcement and public comment section. I just came back from the 2020 Valor Award ceremony at the Bear Trap. Detective Sergeant Brandon Elliott was the award winner of this year from our town. This was involved in the Linda Bravo event where this woman, he worked on this for over 2 weeks, 200 hours of manpower, set up a task force to try to find what happened to her. Unfortunately, she was found, she had passed away, but he was recognized for this achievement. Also were recognized here in Bethany Beach, Brian Martin, Jessica Martin, Shane Truitt, as well as Molly Daisy, Steve Hovonian, Ross Sheridan, from the Bethany Beach Volunteer Fire Company. They were involved this summer, July 4th, when that young woman was killed on a bike here in Bethany Beach, and close to Bethany Beach. And they were awarded for, unfortunately she died 2 days later, but there was a wonderful letter from the parents of the young girl, thanking them, appreciating for giving them the opportunity to be with their daughter for 2 more days. And it was very emotional, very moving. Does anyone in the audience, before we go on, have any announcements to make or comments to make other than anything that's not on the agenda? All right, if that's the case, we'll move on. We'll go to the reports of the members of the Standing Committee. The first one is Mr. Peterson, the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Audit Committee met on the 24th We reviewed the internal auditor's annual report for 2019, which was very thorough and had no significant findings, which is always good. There were a few questions about audit techniques and sampling techniques and a few other things that were all handled very well by our internal auditor. And we then moved on to look at the audit plan for 2020, and we will do the same things we normally do, verifying deposit of all incoming funds, the preparation and approval of purchase orders, review and approval of authorities, review and approval of invoices, reconciliation of bank statements, accuracy of payroll, basically tracking all our money through all of our processes, making sure everything is going according to our requirements for approval levels and for purchases. One area we're going to probably spend a little bit of extra emphasis on is any of our large projects, just doing a double check that everything's okay on those. So if I'd like to park across the street, we'll just do a double check on some of those things as well. We then moved on to our yearly external audit, which is coming up again in a couple months. And our next tentative meeting is planned for May to meet with the external auditors and do our opening conference and making sure we're ready to go for that. So everything's looking good, unless there's any questions.
Thank you for your report. Anyone have any questions for?
Thank you.
Great. The next one is the report from the Budget and Finance Committee. Mr. Healy will be doing this.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Budget and Finance Committee met yesterday, the 20th of February, for the proposed budget for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2021. The draft of the new budget was discussed in detail. Townwide revenues currently budgeted for the year are $10,661,000. Operating expenses budgeted $9,039,000. Capital debt for the year and debt funds to be received are $1,508,000, plus there is a carry forward of $1,204,000 from the prior year. There are no tax or fee increases in this draft budget. The Town Council will hold a public hearing March 16th to hear comments from the public on the proposed budget. The next Budget and Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for March 17 at 10 a.m. As a further thought, I would like to request a workshop after our year-end financial statements for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2020 are available. I believe it would be helpful for us to spend a little time on our financial position of each of our three funds. That is the general fund, two enterprise funds, the water fund and the sanitation fund. Also, we could at this time review the status of our reserve funds and the funding thereof, as well as future focus on these funds over the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your report. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Healy? All right. We'll move on to the report from the Culture and Historic Affairs Committee. Mrs. Olmsted?
Thank you, Mayor. The Cultural and Historical Affairs Committee met on Tuesday, February 11th. And at that meeting, first of all, it was reported that the Seaside Craft Show, which will be coming in, will be on the boardwalk and the adjacent streets the first Saturday in June. This year we'll have 118 booths, or 111 crafters. We had 135 applications this year, and we believe it's the most we ever received. So that was certainly very promising. The committee discussed information that might be included in the booklet for the Bethany Beach tour of our historic homes that will take place in October. This is going to be a fundraiser for the new Coastal Towns Museum that will be in Ocean View. We haven't received many business ads yet, and we've set up a follow-up letter to all Bethany businesses in hope of receiving their support. The homes that will be included are all but one of the homes that are on our Bethany Beach Heritage Trail brochure that's in the lobby here. CHAC is planning on hosting 2 cultural evenings this spring. One of them is going to be Notes on the Beach, which I think many of us are probably familiar with. It's a musical group that performs not only here in Bethany, but in other places close by. They have a program called Tin Pan Alley. And what it is a history of music in America. So it promises to be a very interesting evening, and it's going to be on March 25th. And then in April, Denise Clemens is a local woman who authored a book called The Culinary History of Southern Delaware. It's also subtitled Scrapple Beach Plums and Muskrats. Apparently these were all favorites in the area. Perrier Day 2020, we are once again having a group of visitors from Perrier here in Bethany. And again, 4 families have offered to be host to these guests, including Mr. and Mrs. Gordon and Mr. and Mrs. Frug. That should be another fun summer day. The committee discussed but didn't finalize possible plans for this 3-day visit. Ongoing plans for the Dinker Irvin Cottage Museum were discussed also. Elaine Fay, who is our museum designer, has been here on several occasions recently to do preliminary measuring and evaluation of artifacts. At this time, probably mid to late fall is the target date for completion. We would like to think it would be sometime during the summer. We'll push for that, but as in all things, sometimes things get held up a little bit. Our next meeting will be on March 10th at 10 o'clock. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Do you have any questions for Homestead? Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Gravier.
Mayor, Council, I'm pleased to be able to tell you that Bethany has been chosen by Delaware's Department of Technology for a grant that will help us ensure that we're able to stand any ransomware attempts here in the town.
Oh, wonderful.
DTI last year provided these resources to Newcastle County and the city of Dover. They had 2 openings this year for municipalities that wanted to participate, and we will now be involved in that. They conduct an enterprise security assessment, a penetration test of all systems, networks, and client access devices. They have an executive summary and a remediation report, and I'm pleased we were able to qualify for that.
Something like that could be very devastating for a town like Bethany Beach.
Yes, we wouldn't be able to collect parking revenue, yes, ma'am. Our nature center, the walkway was constructed a good number of years ago, and it was done in a format, in a way that leaves it open so air, light can get around, in, around, and under the walkway. But the path is strung with metal struts that were actually galvanized, but they've deteriorated over the years. We're very actively replacing those at this time, along with replacing some of the Kebney boards on our boardwalk that we've had some issues with. Kebney has been very, very good in working with us to the point in time that when we have boards that have deteriorated and become really sort of hard to walk on, the surface begins to deteriorate and come apart and splinter, they have provided replacement boards, and they use a different process to manufacture those boards. We believe we're almost on our way to having Kebney help us replace almost all the existing first surfacing with their boards. The downside is we pay for the installation, but we're still significantly ahead of using a salt-treated or chemically treated board that warps and splinters to extremes. So that's a positive for us. The park is on schedule. Many people have commented that the pavilion seems very small. The pavilion, there'll be small bands, yes. The pavilion has always been slated to be about 20 feet in diameter, and that's what it is. The plaza area, a little large. And I think as the park is developed and other things are planted, it will seem more in keeping and present itself a little better than it may to those who think it does look too small today. Route 1 has been very busy in our off-season. The first thing that's happened here is the Del Dot, after many, many years, has finally come to the town and opened up the swales, which is really improved with surface drainage and rain events. But of course, it also allows water to backfill during tidal events, but it is a positive for us. And at the same time, Comcast, who is now committed to bringing fiber optic to commercial enterprises in Bethany Beach, have begun their work on Route 1. At the same time, Del Dot has begun an installation of its power lines to install our new roadway lights, which should be done here in the next month or two. So that's all the work on Route 1, and hopefully within the next 6 to 8 weeks, Del Dot will also install a passenger safety light at Wellington and Route 1.
Good.
And Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you. With that, is there any questions for our town manager? All right. With that, there is no old business, so let's move into new business. The first one is the amendment to Section 295-24 pile driving. Mrs. Hardeman, this is a second reading, so we'll be voting today.
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance was drafted at the request of the town council, and there have been some people in town who had no notice of the piles going to be driven beside them, and as a consequence, they suffered damage to their personal belongings. And so what this ordinance would do would require the general contractor to provide advance written notice of the installation of piles to all property owners within 200 feet of the site on which the piles will be installed. And the notice that they'd be required to send would be provided to them by the town building inspector. And in that, people would be advised to not only that the work was going to take place, but also that they should, if they wanted to be able to show there was damage, to take videos or pictures of their inside and outside of their homes prior to that. Otherwise, there'd be no way of showing that the damage was caused by the pile driving, and also give them an opportunity to safeguard their belongings. And prior to receiving a building permit, the contractor would have to provide proof that the notice was sent to all the property owners within 200 feet. Now, council knows that yesterday we received an email, and I've committed to this citizen to read his comments. He's in Florida, and he said if he was here, he would have gotten up and read them into the record and asked that I do so, so I'd like to honor that request. This is from Carl Stitch, who is a property owner in Lake Bethany, and he writes, he wrote 3 separate emails because his computer kept crashing. So I would like to comment from the floor at the subject deliberation, but I am presently in Florida. Would you accept comments via email as official correspondence and read them into the council's record? And the second one is, I am sending this message for public comment discussion at your February 21st council meeting on amending code section 394-24, and I'll monitor your discussions via your video cam. Hello, Mr. Stitch. I have been a property owner since 1981 and have been a full or part-time resident since 1985. I am a retired engineer. My specialty is aerospace with skills in structural and mechanical disciplines. I have had personal damage done to my home due to conventional unmitigated pile driving. After I occupied my home in 1985, homes were constructed on adjacent lots on unattenuated driven pilings. And the third one is, sorry my computer crashed. This is a continuance of my pile driving personal damage to my foundation and upper level framing. Conventional methods are outmoded for environmental concerns as well as liability and legal reasons. Current mitigation approaches include augering, vibratory resonance, and shock wave mitigation. The first 2 are installation methods to attenuate the shock wave. To interpret the wave, you channel or trench the soil to stop propagation in the protected direction. Before piling installation, you must document the existing conditions of any structures within 200 feet in the warning area. This is done with a PDV, which is pre-post driving video. A before and after driving copy of this video record should be furnished to the building inspector and all warning zones concerned structure owners. The warning zone notification letter sent to all affected parties should include all the engineering steps taken to implement all of the pre-driving mitigation methods and rationale. This will provide data to the building official before issuance of a construction permit. The post-driving videos should document compliance with permit regulations. Many monographs are available on current pile installation technology and concerns for your consideration in amending the subject building code. I thank the town manager and council for allowing me to communicate my concerns. And that's the end of it. And I wanted to, just for the record, also note that I spoke with our building inspector regarding Mr. Stitch's concerns, and I also provided her with a copy of what he had said there. And she was aware of his concerns about the pile driving near his home. She has seen his home, and they have discussed this on several occasions, so I won't go into that. That is between the building inspector and Mr. Stitch. But regarding pile driving methods themselves, Chapter 395 of the Town Code addresses building construction. Section 395-1A specifically states that the town adopts and incorporates by reference the International Building Code and the International Residential Code. Our building inspector informed me with regard to construction, the town accepts the general practice in the construction industry as reviewed by, signed and sealed by structural engineers. And structural engineer is involved in certain phases of construction, and she contacts them with specific questions during the construction. So where there is to be pile driving in Bethany Beach, meters are installed at each stage at the edge of the property to monitor vibrations. We did go through when the Cork Committee considered this regulation, we did go through, and we didn't just willy-nilly pick out 200 feet. We went through and did check some studies on vibrations and how far they extend, and we felt confident in consultation with Mrs. Frederick that that was a reasonable distance from the subject piling to have the notice sent. But I also would like to point out that the purpose of this particular ordinance right now is not to address the different methods of pile driving. That's contained in the International Code, Building Code, and they also, as you know, codes change and they develop depending upon the latest technology, and I'm sure that will happen here. Our main purpose here is to make sure that people are provided with notice of imminent pile driving. And we also have right now pile driving requests in the pipeline, so we would like to address that particular issue now with this regulation. And I've given the concerns that Mr. Stitch expressed to Mrs. Frederick, so if she feels that something needs to be done in that regard, she will make her request known. So in the meantime, I've taken a lot of time, but I'd like to, I wanted to honor Mr. Stitch's request, and after addressing it, I'd like to move that we adopt this ordinance today as the second reading.
It's a form of a motion?
A form of a motion.
Second.
Second. I have a question. Who is responsible for informing everyone within 200 feet? Is it the town or the?
No. There's Mrs. Frederick has drawn up a form that will go out to each person, and they will be provided with a list of the people who are within 200 feet, and the contractor has to come back with proof that the mailing was done to those individual people as a condition of obtaining a building permit.
Fine.
So, and I know that
Is
she
there
will
any
take care.
requirement for those individuals to respond back that they received a letter?
No,
Well, it's certified mail.
Certified
and they
mail.
have to
It's
sign.
going
Yeah,
certified
certified
mail?
mail, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
right, fine.
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, do I have a second?
Second.
Now, does anybody have any other questions for Mrs. Arterman regarding this item? Anyone in the audience have any questions regarding this, this change in our ordinance? All right. That's being said, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of this new ordinance, or updated ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Next item on the agenda is, again, Mrs. Hardeman. This is another second reading, amendment to Chapter 440 that deals with the brush and grass.
Thank you, Mayor. And you can see in the audience, we have a number of extra people here today. There are some of my neighbors who live in the canal, which is from where this, the suggestion for this ordinance came. It was drafted at the direction of Town Council, again, based on complaints received from property owners that some property owners, rather than cutting their grass, would just kill all the vegetation on the lot with herbicide. And this led to a dangerous situation, too, because if you look at those lots now, you'll see that there is a lot of runoff and erosion because there's nothing on the lot to hold the water. It causes problems, not only public health and safety, but also with what goes in the swales and ultimately into the canals. So in connection, I worked with, Cork worked with Mrs. Frederick, the building inspector, and also the assistant town manager and code enforcer to come up with an ordinance that they felt would address the issue and which they could enforce. And so you have copies of it there. We had a reading of it, and basically it requires, the genesis of it is that what it does is it requires all property owners to maintain their property, whether it's vacant or built upon, in a way that does not cause any runoff. And they can do it in keeping with what is done as the norm in the neighborhood, whether it be grass, whether it be stone. And I have added, at someone's request last time, that we also, they pointed out that it didn't include pine needles or mulch, which is the basic thing in their neighborhood because they have a lot of pine trees. So rather than enumerate all of them, we just added the wording in other cover, which is, which conforms to what the practice in the neighborhood is. So that's all I have on that. I haven't received any negative pushback on that. And as a matter of fact, it's just been all positive comments. So with that, I would recommend that we adopt the ordinance, the changes to,
442.
yeah, Section 440, brush and grass of the town code, and Section 475-29C, vacant structures and land, and 475-30, and relettering the other sections. And that's a form of a motion.
All right, we have a second.
Second.
Any questions for Mrs. Hardeman? How is this to be enforced?
Through the town. It's through the enforcement officer. What do you mean?
Is there any fines involved if we're?
Oh, yes, sorry. There will be. They're already taken care of. They will.
Yeah, I know that, but
Yeah.
I thought
Yes,
maybe people like to.
there'll be fines involved, yes. There'll be notice as well and the opportunity to take care of it. And if that's not done, there will be fines. And both of these ordinances would take effect immediately upon being approved by the town council. I'll point that out, too.
And the town is aware of the people that already do this. We will notify them when the ordinance is passed that it exists and they need to comply.
Yes, and I'm sure that the fines will be higher than what the cost of a mowing, so. Does anyone in the audience have, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Hello, Dave Kunzel. I live on Seabreeze Drive, 329 in the canal. It's my second home. So just to clarify, you had mentioned, you said pine needles and mulch. You're saying they're not allowed to just put pine needles and mulch down as a remedy. They have to naturally grow, plant grass or naturally grow what is supposed to grow.
It would be something that would be the look and feel of the neighborhood. So, for example, in our neighborhood, it would be grass.
Got it.
Yeah, and somebody else's neighborhood, especially on the north side of 26, where there are a lot of pine trees and grass doesn't grow. The reason I added or other covering in keeping with the look of the neighborhood was because somebody pointed out to me that in their neighborhood, basically, I mean, they take care of their ground, but it's covered with mulch or pine needles that they deliberately put there to hold the soil.
Okay.
Yeah, so in our neighborhood, it would be different from another neighborhood.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. And you've seen the two lots,
Yes.
especially the lot next to me. I'm not exactly sure what's going to grow there eventually and how long it's going to take to grow something. So I don't know. what we can do about that, but it may take 3 years for the old brush to grow back to the way it is. So was there any thought around a time frame when people need to get these lots back to snuff? Because I'm not exactly sure, if anything's going to grow there this coming year or the year after.
I know something about, if they use Roundup, I know something about that material. It has really no soil activity per se.
Okay.
So while it's really a glyphosate that actually works with the roots of the plant, but doesn't really impact the soil per se.
Right.
So it should be a quick recovery. Let me put
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I only bring that up because it's been pretty warm, and at home in Annapolis, we have petunias coming up, and the lot next to me is still completely brown.
Yeah.
I would think something would be peeking its way back up by now, and there's really,
It might take a little while. I mean, not one, but it's not going to take years to get that to come back.
okay.
Yeah.
And was this the actual vote, or is there a vote that's going to happen afterwards?
We're going to do it right now.
Oh, you are. Is there any additional information you feel like you need to get this passed? Or are you good with what you have?
No.
Well, I mean, it's damaging to the property next to you. When they spray, it kills your grass, other stuff like that, but it sounds like you guys are good to go from a voting perspective.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think they did this once before, and it did grow back again. Oh, Mr. Gilbert?
I'm Terry Gilbert from 328 Canal Court, a block over from the two offending lots. I have a question, and that is there going to be some kind of mitigation of the erosion in the swales that's already occurred, and who's going to be responsible for that?
If we see we have a mitigation problem and a serious erosion problem, we'll notice the property owner. I don't know, John, if you've seen that on those properties in the canal or yet?
Not a tremendous amount, not enough to warrant
If you're comfortable with it, that's fine with me.
But if this gentleman's concerns, I mean, there is a variety of things you can put on the ground that will make the ground dead. If that's what's happened and this persists for a period of time, we'll deal that with the property owner.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, because if it doesn't grow back, obviously there's something else going on here.
I think that's all they do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Can we have a vote? All in favor of the amendment to these sections of the code regarding the maintenance of brush and grass? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next item on the agenda, this is for Mr. Gravier. Discussion and consideration and possible vote on considering an ordinance in March that would reduce the maximum number of town council candidate seats in any election from 4 to 3 and will extend the terms from 2 years to 3 years.
Mayor, council, I'd like to ask the council to consider increasing town council terms from 2 years to 3 years. I think there are substantive reasons for doing this, and I'd like to present them to the council for their consideration. At the outset of any conversation, I'd like to be clear that should the council consider an increase in terms, that would require an ordinance change and at least 2 readings. That means that the council actually wanted to move quickly forward with this, introduced an ordinance in March for a first reading. It would be voted on in April. So this is an issue if it moves forward quickly. At least we'll be out there for public comment for 2 more months. The council may decide that it wants to consider it, host a workshop, host another meeting to discuss it. It may not move forward at all, but if it does, it'll be months away from coming to fruition. I recommend this change to the council for 3 years for a variety of reasons. But to be very clear, this is an issue I am bringing to the council. This is something I suggest they consider. This is not council-driven, this is manager-driven. And a number of years ago, this was brought forward, I guess over a decade ago, as a council issue, and it failed at that point in time, I think for a variety of the wrong reasons, but I ask you to reconsider it again. And I apologize if this might be a little long. I apologize to the audience who might be here for other things, but I'm going to try to cover a couple of the issues that arise whenever this comes up and things that are spoken to when this sort of a change is suggested. The council, as it's configured today with 7 members in a 2-year term, was first configured this way in the 50s. Prior to that, there were 5 commissioners, 2 judges, and 1 inspector. They comprised a 7-person council, but they had different titles and I believe a different term. The first time we can find 7 commissioners in a 2-year term is in the 50s. The town budgets around that point in time were $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Staff consisted of 3 or 4 people. Year-round population was about 80, with a few hundred living here in the summer. 2-year terms made sense. Bethany government was very local, and the issues and the problems that they dealt with, or didn't, better yet, didn't have to deal with, made a 2-year term seem logical, a logical length of time to serve. Today, our budget is almost $9.5 million. We have a full-time staff of 39, a seasonal staff of 177. Today, the town runs its own water service, its own sanitation service, its own public transportation service, leads the area in emergency preparedness, has a nationally accredited police department, nationally certified lifeguards, recently borrowed for and constructed a $2.3 million water tower at its state-of-the-art water treatment facility, used its relationship with state government to obtain a $2.6 million streetscape grant that required no match from the town, and used $750,000 in state and federal resources to purchase the 23 acres the Nature Center is located on, and then it obtained a grant to develop the park. The town has constructed a streetscape project using pervious pavement, the first of its kind in the region, found the necessary resources to purchase the last piece of wetlands in the community, and the town, on the other hand, along with those things, lobbies relentlessly at both the state and federal level for a variety of things, most importantly for beach replenishment. The town works with state and federal officials to fight the impact of sea level rise, is actively involved with the Association of Coastal Towns, the Center for Inland Bays, the Sussex County Association of Towns, the Resilient Community Leagues, the Delaware League of Local Government, and along with all of that, council members seated at this table represent Bethany's interest and advocate for Bethany Beach on over a dozen statewide committees. Our mayor is even the president of the Delaware League of Local Government, Delaware's most powerful advocate for municipal government. I could go on and on and on. Bethany's government is far more complex than it was decades ago. Today, an effective council person not only has to be effective in Bethany Beach, he or she has to work at the regional level, the state level, and the federal level in order to do all that's needed for our citizens. Our community faces a multitude of incredibly complex and multi-layered issues, and for better or worse, Bethany Beach is not what it was 50 or 60 years ago, yet we ask the town council to work like it's the 50s. A 2-year term is simply not in the best interest of effective and efficient government in Bethany Beach. When a council person is newly elected, the staff tries to orient the new member as quickly as possible. Council members mentor new members. We work to get the new member their leadership certification from the University of Delaware, and go on with the things we try to do to prep and work with council members to make them effective immediately. But inevitably, the first 12 to 18 months is a learning experience, and no one is experienced, confident with the needed grounding in institutional knowledge until they are into their 2nd year on the council, and then they are immediately thrown in to another election cycle. It is counterproductive, and again, not in the best interest of Bethany Beach. I believe a 3-year term allows council members to be more effective and better representatives of the community, and I don't believe I'm alone in this. I think without fail, if you ask most current and former council members, they would agree. And when you look at the region, and you look at the size of various governments and the complexity of those governments, and I've looked at governments that are on the Delmarva, in the Delmarva coastal zone. I've tried to choose governments that have a beach component, a coastal component, because our governments are far more complex because of the tourist and the values of our property. And you look at budgets, you can see that I think the more complex communities, almost to a community with the exception of Bethany Beach, have moved to 3-year terms. And I think Lewis was the last one of the communities in the area to have done this, and I think they did it in 2015 or 2016. This is a trend that I think you'll continue to see. Certainly, the larger communities in Delaware, Newark, Dover, Wilmington, have longer terms than even 3-year terms. I believe there are 2 added benefits to a 3-year term. First, I believe a 2-year term is a disincentive for those considering whether to run for a town council seat. The prospect of having to run for a council seat, the work, and it involves a good deal of work and preparation if you are a serious candidate, the expenses and the thought of having to repeat that every 22 months is a disincentive. And to that point, Bethany Beach has a very, very real problem generating interest in elections. Over the last 25 years, in 36% of our election cycles, no one has even filed to challenge the incumbent, and there have been no elections. And in the last decade, no one has filed in 40% of those cycles. This invites the comment that no one files because the incumbents are entrenched, but the facts don't support that. In the 16 elections we have had in the last 25 years, 42 different people have filed for election. 30 of those 42 won council seats, served an average of 6 years or 3 terms. The problem isn't the incumbents, the problem is a lack of interest in filing to run. And again, I believe a 3-year term will help with that interest. The second benefit is that many of those 30 people I just spoke about left the council after 1 or 2 election cycles, and one of the big reasons is the short election cycle. The town might well have benefited from their continued service. 2-year terms are disincentive to file, and then once on council, they discourage continued involvement. Without fail, any discussion about term extension, even the small one suggested here, will have someone ask questions about term limits. But that clearly eliminates choice in a community where a lack of interest in running for the council has already reduced voter choice. When you add term limits to the fact that in one of every 3 races, essentially, we don't even have an election, you really limit the community's choice to be involved and make a choice. And I think that's a real negative for Bethany Beach. Again, in the last 10 years, 4 years with no elections. And while discussions about term limits were the rage a few years ago, only 15 states have adopted term limits with mixed results, and they have not resonated in the region either. Listing of municipalities with term limits, and only our immediate neighbor to the west, Ocean View, has a term limit, 2 terms and skipping 1 year. The second issue that is entwined with a change in term limits is what the council would like to do if it changes limits in terms of an election cycle. If you were to change your limits from 2 years to 3 years and did nothing else, then you would have an election 1 year for 4 people, an election for 3, and then have to skip a year. And I don't think the council wants to do that. There is a way that we can segue into another cycle, and that is a 3, 2, and 2 cycle. And the way that it's laid out here would be if the council were to move ahead in a short time frame, in 2020, for instance, the bottom 2 vote getters would be in a 2-year term. In 21, the lowest of the lowest vote getter would be in a 2-year term, and that cycles out so that by 25 and 26, you're in a 3-2-2 cycle. Along with that, then comes criticism that, well, this isn't good because the citizens won't be able to vote out a majority of council members. Well, when you look at this, you can only vote out a majority of council members in an even year. If you want to do it in an odd year, you have to wait to the second year. So it's a 2-year process in those years. It's a 2-year process here, a slight change. You can still accomplish voting out a majority. It takes 2 years instead of, if you're fortunate enough to do it and want to do it in an even year. So it's a very small change. In addition, when we go back through our records, we can find no indication that has ever occurred in Bethany Beach. There is an urban legend in Bethany that many years ago, I think a full slate of candidates were voted out because they were considering annexing the Saw Pond. That's not the case. In that particular year, only 2 people were voted off the council. So, in sum up, I think on a number of levels, the experience level, incentive to run, incentive to stay on council, but most especially the experience level is a good reason to consider this, and I would ask you to do that. When this was brought up a number of years ago, some of the pushback came because this wasn't an issue that came from the people. The people didn't want it. There wasn't a groundswell of people coming to the council and suggesting that the council move from a 2-year term to a 3-year term. Well, in reality, in any given election cycle, when we do have elections, we're fortunate if we bring out 10 to 15% of our voters. And as I've already said, in many cycles, we don't even have elections. I don't know that our citizens view the need, but I can see it sitting here and working with councils for many years, that a 3-year cycle would be a benefit to the community. Another thing that comes up and that was offered, well, it works. Well, it doesn't work. The idea that it's not broken, don't fix it. It is broken. It could work better, and I suggest the council consider it for those reasons. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Gravier regarding this proposal to be considered at the next, in the March meeting? Any comments?
No, it was very complete, the way he went through it, so I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Healy.
Does anyone in the audience wish to make any comments? Please come to the...
I'm still Terry Gilbert, and I'm still at 328 Canal Court for anyone who's...
I'm surprised.
I agree with your point completely, and I want experienced people doing this. We've been very lucky in this town for a very long time to actually have qualified people in those seats up there. You know, our government in this town works a lot better than in most places, better than we, since we don't participate a hell of a lot, have any right to expect. But the reality is that I think once you guys get in a position like that, you need to exercise what you've learned. And that's not going to happen if you're back at the ballot box, you know, if your name's in the ballot box 2 years from now. So I agree wholeheartedly that we need to take advantage of the experience that you guys have gotten.
Thank you for your comments. Yes? I agree. Oh, all right. Well, thank you.
Whoever you are.
Thank you.
And you live close to the park, right? Okay.
All right, if there's some other comments, oh, yes, please. Mr. Gordon.
Hi, Jack Gordon, 936 Heron Drive, Bethany Beach. I would just like to say that I think this is a great idea. I thought it was a great idea 7 or 8 or 9 years ago whenever we brought it up, mainly because of the idea of the experience level you pick up in being a council member and are able to contribute more in a 3-year term than they are in a 2-year term. I also agree that term limits are not anything that should go along with this, because I think the voters are able to generate change on the council over that period of time. So it's a great idea. The council should consider it, and the council should vote it in my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would.
Yes, please.
I think I do appreciate everything that you've said. And some people have raised the issue of, well, you know, by the time people are brought up to date, but then they're up to date and, what's after that. But I found on the time that I have on council that every year I learn more and more. And I learn more and more from people who live here who contact me and say, I have a problem with this or I have a problem with that. And those of you who I've worked for know that I put everything into that. And so does everybody on this council. And I think the more years of experience you have with anything, the better you get at it and the more you get to know the people that you work for. And we work for you. That's all. And I do think that Ocean View is a different situation.
Well,
I didn't mean it that way.
No.
Their form of government is a little different.
Ocean View has
5 districts.
representative districts.
Yeah.
So
And-
in that way, they are different. than
And they
Bethany Beach.
also, I think you can only vote if you actually are a resident.
Yes.
If
they
you're a
limit that
property
way,
owner
too.
and don't live there, you can't vote.
Yeah.
So I think their situation is a little different from ours.
We'll talk about choice.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Anything else? Or so we'll be seeing this as an agenda item in March.
If I will have a draft ordinance. If any council member wants to move it forward, I will have an ordinance for them to do so.
And I also, since this is part of our charter, it would have to go,
It would have to be, if the council does move
Right.
on this, it would go to the Delaware General Assembly.
Assembly, you have to be signed by them and the
confirmation.
governor. Yes, all right, so it's a process. All right, I'm next.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. The next item on the agenda is discussion, consideration, and possible vote on a resolution to forward to Governor Carney, Denrick Secretary Garvin, and our state and local legislators addressing town council concerns regarding the proposed skipjack wind farm. Mr. Kilmer.
Yes, I can't imagine anyone in this room is not aware of what's about to possibly happen. The state of the situation right now is a memorandum of understanding has been drafted and agreed to from the company called Ørsted, which is a company out of Denmark, and the state of Delaware. That's where we are right now. That's the extent of it. Many of the coastal communities which will be directly impacted by this have created resolutions on their own. And to make sure that everyone at the state level and also at the county level understand what our concerns were. Like other communities, we have also drafted a resolution with this issue. And rather than reading the entire resolution, which I think is available online, I'll just read the last section, which I think sums up everything that we're concerned about. Therefore, be it resolved. It is important that all aspects of the project be re-examined and further studied to ensure that they are in the best interest of Delaware's coastal environment, public health and safety, economic vitality, and the quality of life we all cherish. Accordingly, the Town Council desires and respectfully requests, in the interest of transparency, notification and opportunity for input into any future discussions and decisions regarding the project, including the size and the location of the wind turbines, the construction of the electrical transmission facilities, and the infrastructure in Fenwick Island State Park, as well as any financial arrangements as only befits those impacted by construction. And that's really the highlight of the resolution. Myself and other people, everyone on the council has met with Ørsted representatives. The current situation right now, which has been expressed to us just yesterday, it'll be about 19.8 miles off the coast of Delaware. There'll only be 12 units. It will be the larger 12 megawatt turbines, and that's what their proposals are. We have these are supplied by Ørsted, and it's an opportunity to see from a visual point of view what something would look like in 19.8 miles, almost 20 miles off the coast. This is the first of the series of wind turbine farms that are going to be proposed. Keep in mind, this is all in federal waters, so the only control we have is where the lines come in, and interact with the land, and then we have some control at that point. But the leasing of them and the construction of them is really federally regulated by BOM. So that's our status, and all we're doing is trying to we want to be a partner in this. All right, I personally feel on my own personal level that I think it's important for a community like Bethany Beach. There's only 84 foot, the average is 84 feet above sea level. And anybody who's lived here for a long time, you'll see that the sea levels are rising. I'm not going to go into the political aspects of what the causes are. The reality is that they're rising. And all I'm saying at this point is that I think, again, all my personal, I believe also members of all the council believe that we should take this into serious consideration, that the wind farms are at least a viable alternative to deal with climate change. And I'll make that in the form of a resolution that we approve the resolution, in form of a resolution to approve the resolution regarding the wind farms and the town of Bethany Beach.
I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah. I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, I think global warming is coming, and I think we need to get away from fossil fuels, and this is a beginning to it. But as soon as I mention this to some folks, they say, well, what's this good for Delaware? Because, the electricity is sponsored by Maryland. Well, the answer is the electrons are gone into the grid. We all use the same electrons, it's just who pays for it. And secondly, we still have a coal-fired plant in Indian River. It's about 4 megawatts. These will be about 1/4 of that. So it's a start to try and get rid of all the coal use that we're doing now in Indian River. So I think that's important. Secondly, a lot of people don't want to see these structures out there in the water, but you can take a look at this picture and see you can barely see them. If they're 19 miles out, I checked, the distance from Lewis to Cape May is 17 miles. And it's tough to see anything in Cape May if you've tried, so you get an idea, it's really going to be tiny. And on the rare clear days we have, you might see it, but I don't think you'll see much.
The other thing that I think is a misconception, that Maryland is benefiting from all this. In essence, they are from the standpoint of view this way. They're subsidizing this project with their monies. And at the same time, they are going to get the renewable energy credits because they are, even though they're going to be in Delaware, they're getting the renewable energy credits that many of these places are required to have, are always required to have. And the cost of these turbines are all going to be paid by the Maryland ratepayers, so not Delaware. So, but that's the other aspect that people don't realize. So, but anyway, that's just to fill in, and I think we have a second and
We do, but I'd like to then, if nobody here has any further discussion, then I'd like to ask if anyone in the audience has anything they'd like to say.
all right.
All right. Okay, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Last item on the agenda. Discussion, consideration, and a possible vote on a proposal submitted by Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems to purchase a fully equipped 2020 Freightliner chassis with a Heil 25-yard high compaction rear load compactor. Wow. I want one of those. Installed on the chassis for the amount of $165,355. Mr. Gravier.
Mayor, Council, you have a purchase order from the Public Works Department in front of you. The town solicited bids. We received 4 bids that range from $204,000 to a low of $166,355. I would ask that you consider accepting the low bid, which would award the contract to Mid-Atlantic Waste Systems for both the truck, the chassis, and the compaction unit. Thank you very much. I kind of get lost in it here. Thanks a lot. And that is again for $166,355.
So we'd like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second. Have any further questions or comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. This is in the budget.
Yes.
This is
We
clearly in
should
the
know
budget, yes.
This is in the budget, and it's part of a planned
Replacement.
every year to replace one of our trash trucks.
Yeah, and this is replacing a 2009 truck, so it's it's getting trashy.
That was my question.
Oh, all right. All in favor of approving the expenditures of $166,355 for a new 2020 Freightliner M2 chassis? Truck? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Before we adjourn, is there anything else that anybody in the room would like to bring anything up to the town council?
Mayor, I'd like to say one
Yes.
thing, if that's possible. Just want to remind everybody that this is the year of the U.S. Census. You'll all be getting postcards in the mail in mid-March, and they'll give you a code so you can go into a computer and you can file a census. It's only 9 questions per person. You got 20 people living in your house, it's going to take a little longer. But it's pretty simple, and it's important to Delaware because the number of people in Delaware determines what percent of the federal budget we get back here for transportation, education, health, and all those kind of things. And secondly, it will help in the redistricting that's coming. We may get another representative down here in Sussex. And if we all pray, we might get an extra representative in Congress. So it's important to get a full count. So,
We're that close. We're that close of getting a second one, yeah.
so please tell your friends and neighbors, and everybody counts. You know, a 1-month-old baby or a 102-year-old grandparent, whoever's in that house should be written down, not the pets, so.
Rats. I was going to ask. Rats would count.
You mean Mr. Pete can? If there's any other questions? If not, someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Good job.
So far.
You kept us moving right along, didn't you?